The story starts off with a legendary hitman named Juzo, who is making his way over to the location of his latest targets. He was told ahead of time that there would only be about 1 or 2 guards on site, but when he actually arrives, he is surprised to find a large number of them standing around. Even so, Juzo keeps his cool without even flinching, and simply reaches into his pocket and pops a cigar into his mouth, and when one of them steps forward and questions him about who exactly he is, Juzo quickly draws his gun and shoots him down right on the spot without any hesitation. The rest of them all move in together and try to attack Juzo in response, but he simply pulls out his 9mm and takes them all down one after the other without breaking so much as a sweat. One of the main targets immediately recognizes Juzo as the legendary hitman who is known for being willing to kill absolutely anyone as long as the price being offered is right, so he immediately heads straight for the safe, grabs as many valuable items as he possibly can, and then starts running for his life. But Juzo spots him making his move and sticks his foot out just in time to trip the guy and make him go crashing hard to the floor. Juzo calmly corrects the man, telling him that he only goes after people that he personally deems as truly irredeemable and beyond any saving. The man scrambles and turns back around and very quickly tries to pull out a gun and shoot Juzo, but Juzo is already standing right behind him and drops him instantly with a single powerful punch straight to the gut that knocks him out completely cold. After everything is taken care of, the disposal unit arrives to handle the cleanup, and outside the building Juzo scolds his apprentice, Nakoda, for previously telling him that there would only be about 1 or 2 people on site when there were actually 25 of them waiting inside. Nakoda acknowledges his mistake and owns up to it, but he also cannot help himself from expressing just how genuinely impressed he is by the fact that Juzo was somehow able to take down all 25 of those guys completely on his own. The two of them then take a closer look inside the briefcase that the man had been carrying when he tried to run, and they find what appears to be some kind of wasp nest. Juzo does not really think too much of it at the time though, since he honestly has no idea what it even is or what it could mean. The next day, he heads back to his home, and while he is getting on the elevator, a young kid accidentally bumps right into him. The kid takes one good look at Juzo's intimidating face and immediately gets frightened and runs away from him as fast as he possibly can. Juzo does not really think too much of it or let it bother him all that much, since he has honestly never really been all that good with kids in the first place. He thinks to himself that if only he had been better at that kind of thing back then, maybe his family life might have actually turned out the way it was supposed to and actually worked out for the better. But then he reminds himself that it wasn't entirely his fault either, because the truth is that he and his ex-wife simply did not have a single thing in common with each other, not even one single shared interest between them to build anything on. His work as a hitman is honestly all he really has going for him in his life, and even that is not something he does out of any real passion or genuine enjoyment. He does it simply because he happens to be very good at it, and for no other reason beyond that. He thinks it all over quietly to himself and slowly comes to the realization that he's lived a really boring life. Just then, Nakoda arrives at his apartment, so Juzo goes over to speak with him, but that is when a wasp suddenly flies close and stings him right on the neck. It sends a sharp surge of pain tearing through his body, and after a good while of wailing in agony, he eventually collapses to the floor. A little while later, he wakes up in a lab that is being run by his ex-wife, Iri. The zoo is the assassin company that Juzo works for, and he is currently in their science division. Iri explains that the cause of his blackout was wasp venom, and Juzo puts it together immediately because he did hold onto that wasp nest from his last job. She then hands him a mirror and tells him that she only just found out about this herself, but the company his target had been dealing with was a firm that also carries out research into genetic manipulation in living organisms. In other words, what stung him was no ordinary wasp. Juzo takes a look at himself in the mirror and is completely shocked to see that he looks a full 20 years younger than he did before. He asks Iri whether he will ever be able to change back, but she is not certain herself, so all they can really do for now is keep a close eye on how things develop. Just then, Juzo gets a call from his boss, and when he speaks, his boss is immediately taken aback by how high his voice sounds now. Juzo admits that things have gotten pretty strange, but tells him he can still go ahead and carry out whatever job he has lined up for him next. His boss figured he would say exactly that, so he tells him he has the perfect assignment for him. He wants wants him to attend a middle school. Juzo is instantly thrown off by hearing that. His boss goes on to explain that he is thinking of enrolling his daughter in a particular private middle school this coming year, so he wants Juzo to slip in there and investigate the place from the inside. Juzo is completely outraged by this because it sounds far more like babysitting than anything close to actual assassinating. But Eri thinks it actually sounds about right, since Juzo dropped out of middle school himself. Juzo goes back and forth on it for a little while, but the moment he hears he is going to be paid very handsomely for it, he agrees on the spot. A few days later, before Juzo's first day of school, Nakoda puts together a pair of glasses fitted with built-in cameras and microphones so he can assist Juzo during the mission from the outside if he runs into any trouble. Before Juzo heads out, he takes a moment to acknowledge just what a disaster this whole situation is, because he is now going to be surrounded by kids all day and he genuinely cannot stand kids. But he goes along with it anyway since it is for the money, and beggars simply cannot be choosers. That morning at school, all the new students are doing their introductions one by one, and while everyone else handles it just fine, Juzo delivers the most painfully awkward introduction anyone has ever seen, which effectively kills any chance he had with the girls in his class since they now think he is completely weird. Though one blonde girl in his class seems to find him oddly interesting. When he gets back home, Nakoda prepares him a rice omelet and Juzo is genuinely surprised by how delicious it turns out to be. That aside, Nakoda brings up just how awful his introduction was earlier that day and also reminds him that he needs to keep his real identity completely hidden at all times and that he cannot afford to cause any trouble because that could easily get him suspended or even expelled. The next day at school, lessons get underway and Juzo is not the least bit impressed at first because he's a middle-aged man who has already been married and has a daughter of his own, so there is no way anything this school has to offer is going to fascinate him. But he is quickly proven wrong when he stumbles across the concept of negative numbers. He has spent his entire life assuming that numbers only ever went upward and had absolutely no idea that negative numbers even existed, so discovering them genuinely captivates him. As a kid, he never received any kind of traditional education and was instead placed directly into the organization's training, so getting to experience learning things like this is something he never had the chance to do before. By the end of the day, lessons wrap up and Juzo cannot help but feel a real sense of excitement because he now realizes there is an entire world of things he never knew that he actually has the chance to learn. That night after school, Nakoda walks into his room and is surprised to find Juzo sitting there actually doing some studying, even after being so firmly against the whole idea earlier. But what he finds a little unsettling is just how intensely passionate about it Juzo already seems to be. The next morning, a strange man is spotted standing at a distance and staring toward the school entrance. At the end of that school day, Juzo has had yet another day full of remarkable new things to learn and finds himself genuinely excited about the next day's lesson. He decides to head back home after that, but that is when he hears some kind of commotion nearby, so he goes over to see what is going on. He finds an athletic-looking man in a panda mask who just dropped the security guard with a single kick. People around seem to recognize him as Panda Mask, and the girls around find him funnier than anything as they pull out their phones to record the whole thing. But then all of a sudden, Panda Mask makes a move and runs straight over to the same two girls who have been giving Juzo attitude ever since he arrived and starts harassing them aggressively. As Juzo stands there watching, Nakoda reminds him of how badly those girls have been treating him and tells him he does not actually have to help them, since it is not like their lives are in any real danger. But Juzo tells Nakoda that he is far too mature a person to sit back and refuse to help someone simply because he does not technically have to. So he tosses an eraser into the air and shoots at it to create a smoke screen so that nobody can see who is actually behind it all. He then hits Panda Mask with one clean strike, and although it does some serious damage, he is surprised that it was not enough to put him down entirely. But he quickly realizes that makes perfect sense given how much his strength has dropped since he ended up in this younger body. As a desperate last resort, Panda Mask pulls out a stick of dynamite and threatens to blow everyone there sky high. But Juzo simply drives his foot straight into his groin, which drops him instantly, then flings the dynamite up into the air and shoots it before it can do any damage. Once the smoke finally clears, the two girls spot Juzo standing right in front of them and put together that he was the one who saved them. But Juzo flatly denies the whole thing, telling them it was actually some random guy who took Panda Mask down and that he himself just happened to be walking past at the right time, which leaves both girls standing there completely confused. The next day at school, things settle back to normal and Juzo's classmates are in the process of putting together a group chat. All that is left is to decide whether or not to add Juzo, but they start second guessing themselves because he comes across as such a loner and a complete oddball. But then the two girls he saved the day before walk straight up to him and ask if he wants to be added to the group chat. And while doing so, they both blush a little as they thank him for what he did for them yesterday. Juzo honestly could not care less about being in any group chat, but he does not want to let them down after they went out of their way to ask him personally, so he goes ahead and agrees to join. That night, Juzo is left completely caught off guard as his phone will not stop going off with one notification after another pouring in from the group chat without any sign of slowing down. Nakoda can see that Juzo is looking tense, so he asks if he wants a cigarette to take the edge off. But Juzo tells him that he has just quit altogether because his younger body simply cannot handle cigars anymore. And on top of that, it cannot handle alcohol either. Even with all of that said, Juzo admits that he honestly feels a whole lot better than he ever used to back in his old body. He decides to sit with things for a little longer just to see how everything continues to develop. And after taking it all in, he turns his attention back to getting his homework done. Later that night, while Juzo is studying, he receives a phone call from Eri. She tells him that the wasp that stung him does not exist in nature at all. According to her findings, it was artificially created. The company responsible for it is Mitsuoka Pharmaceuticals, which is the second largest pharmaceutical company in Japan. Eri then adds something even more important. The president of that company has a daughter who attends the same school as Juzo and is even in his class. Her name is Norin Mitsuoka. Because of this, Eri suggests that Juzo should try to make contact with her. She believes that Norin might be able to give them more information about what is really going on. The next day, Juzo goes back to his normal, boring school life. The two girls he saved before, Takada and Baba, have started to become friendlier toward him. They even encourage him to talk more in the group chat. Juzo responds awkwardly and says he will try his best. During class, Juzo cannot stop looking at Norin. He keeps thinking about how he can approach her. Norin, however, is more than just a pretty face. She is also very skilled in physical activities, especially running. Because of that, the thirsty boys in her class keep watching her, hoping they'll ever have a chance with her. In the next period, Eri contacts Juzo again and reminds him that he should try to make contact with Norin. She says that Norin might have useful information about their situation. Juzo is unsure and says he doubts that she would know anything useful. However, Eri insists that Norin is still their best chance of finding new information, so Juzo agrees that he will try. By lunchtime, Nakoda starts speaking through the speaker in Juzo's glasses. He mocks Juzo for being a loner. Juzo responds by reminding Nakoda that there is a more than 20-year age gap between them, so it would be very sus if he tried to act too normal or fit in too quickly with the students. Even though he knows it will be awkward, Juzo understands that he still has to talk to Norin. He gathers his courage and walks up to her to greet her. However, the moment he approaches her, she immediately calls him a creep and tells him to stay away from her. This makes Juzo realize that the situation is going to be much harder than he expected. Later, Takada and Baba hear about what happened from Juzo, but they are not surprised at all. They explain that Norin is known for being very cold and distant. Many guys have confessed to her, but she rejects them right away. She is always alone and does not have any close friends, whether male or female. At the end of the school day, Juzo is walking home while talking with Nakoda. He starts thinking again and realizes that getting any information from Norin might be impossible. Because of that, he decides to give up on the idea for now. As he is walking, he starts feeling hungry, so he goes into a ramen restaurant to eat. While inside, he suddenly notices Norin working there as a waiter. Norin also looks surprised to see him. After a few seconds, both of them try to act normal. Juzo sits down and orders his food, and Norin takes his order. While waiting, Juzo starts overthinking everything. He wonders why the daughter of a pharmaceutical company president is working in a small, ordinary ramen shop. Soon after, his ramen arrives. At first, he expects it to be average or unimpressive, but after one bite, his expression changes completely. He is shocked by how rich and delicious the ramen tastes, and he reacts with genuine excitement as he keeps eating. While he is focused on his food, Norin suddenly walks up to him and quietly tells him to meet her behind the shop when he is finished eating. At the back alley, Norin feels extremely embarrassed that someone from her school has discovered she works there. She immediately begs Juzo to keep it a secret from everyone at school. Juzo agrees without hesitation and promises he will not tell anyone. After that, the two of them begin walking home together. Along the way, Juzo becomes curious and asks Norin why she is working in a ramen shop even though her family is wealthy. Norin explains that the ramen shop belongs to her uncle. Because of that, she is not really being paid like a normal part-time worker. Instead, she is simply helping out a family member. Juzo then asks what the point of it is if it's not an actual job. Norin becomes quiet for a moment and then opens up more honestly. She explains that ever since she was a child, she has always been aware of how rich her family is and how people also see her as the pretty rich girl. However, that has always bothered her because of the strict and old-fashioned expectations her parents try to force on her. Because of this, she has always had one dream. She wants to open her own ramen shop one day. She hates her family's outdated mindset and wants to live by her own strength instead of depending on their wealth or reputation. She also wants to continue the flavor and style of her uncle's ramen, which she truly admires. Norin then explains more about her uncle. He became a ramen chef because he doesn't like the idea of people only spending time with others from the same social class or wealth level. Whenever Norin felt sad or stressed as a child, her uncle would simply cook ramen for her without saying anything. Even without words, that simple act always made her feel better and gave her comfort. After hearing this, Juzo agrees with her. He tells her that she doesn't need to live according to her parents' expectations just because she is their child. He also adds that the ramen he ate earlier was really delicious. Hearing this makes Norin visibly brighten up. Even though she didn't personally cook the ramen, she helped with preparing the ingredients, so she feels proud knowing she contributed to something that turned out so well. They continue walking together until they reach the point where they have to separate. Just before leaving, Norin tells Juzo that just because she opened up to him does not mean he should start acting friendly with her or talking to her normally at school. Juzo accepts this and says that it was nice while it lasted. He then says goodbye and starts to leave. However, right at that moment, a van suddenly pulls up behind Norin. Before she can react, she is quickly grabbed and pulled inside. The van immediately speeds off and drives away. Juzo tries to run after it, but he is not fast enough to catch up. He stops and starts thinking about why anyone would kidnap a quiet girl like Norin. Then he remembers that her father is the president of a very suspicious pharmaceutical company. Because of that, there are many possible reasons she could be targeted. Nakoda is already monitoring the situation and quickly checks the van's license plate. However, he discovers that it is a fake plate, meaning it was designed specifically to avoid being tracked or identified. Nakoda concludes that it may already be too late to rescue her. Even after hearing that, Juzo refuses to give up. He immediately starts running in the direction the van went. He pulls some insane Parker moves and climbs up a cell tower to get a better view of the area. From there, he spots the van stopped at a red light in the distance. Juzo pulls out his handgun and attempts to shoot at it. Nakoda tells him that it is pointless because there is no way he can hit a target from that distance. However, Juzo calculates the angle and trajectory carefully and fires a tracking dart instead. The dart hits the van directly. Now that they have a way to track it, Juzo follows the signal until it leads him to an abandoned building. Inside, the kidnappers remove the blindfold from Norin. When they see her face clearly, they realize she is actually very beautiful. One of them gets carried away and starts thinking about kissing her. However, the boss suddenly arrives and smacks him away. He apologizes to Norin for his subordinate's bad manners and says he's going to kill him for that later. The boss then calmly asks Norin about the secret of the top secret new drug her father's company is developing. He says he knows that Norin has information about it. Norin replies that she doesn't know what he is talking about. The boss insists that she stop pretending and says he already knows she is lying. Norin honestly has no idea what he is referring to and doesn't understand anything about a secret drug. The boss believes she is still lying, so he threatens to destroy her uncle's ramen shop if she refuses to talk. Norin panics and begs him not to do that. She swears again that she truly doesn't know anything about what he is asking. At that moment, the boss is suddenly shot in the head by Juzo. Norin turns around in shock to see what happened, but Juzo immediately puts a bag over her head so she cannot see his face or or identity. The boss's remaining lackeys prepare to attack Juzo. However, Juzo reacts instantly and shoots them all down one by one. He only uses rubber bullets because he is not killing anyone while he is technically off the clock. Juzo quickly realizes there are still more enemies outside. He places Norin onto a cart to move her safely. When another enemy appears, Juzo pulls an insane flip move using the cart and knocks him out. As they move through the hallway, more lackeys open fire. Juzo uses the cart as moving cover, tilting it to block the shots while continuing to run toward the stairs. On the stairway, they run into more enemies, but Juzo uses his trained hitman skills to quickly take them down without slowing down. When they reach outside, Juzo thinks it is finally over. However, the boss suddenly reappears, having regained consciousness, and drives a car straight toward them in an attempt to run them over. Juzo tries shooting through the windshield, but he realizes the glass is bulletproof. With no other option, he pushes Norin off the cart to safety, then rolls the cart directly toward the incoming car. He then uses a wooden ornament to create a ramp, causing the car to launch into the air and flip over them. The vehicle crashes hard, and the boss dies from the impact. After everything is over, Juzo makes Norin inhale chloroform, causing her to lose consciousness so she will stop asking questions or reacting to what happened. The next day, Norin wakes up in her room completely confused. She wonders if everything that happened was just a dream. However, when she notices the marks on her wrist, she immediately realizes that it was real. She begins thinking about who could have saved her. She suspects it might have been Juzo. Later at school, she confronts him and asks directly, but Juzo pretends not to know anything and acts completely clueless. Before she can push further, Juzo casually tells her that he will be coming to eat ramen there sometimes from now on. He smirks and asks if she will treat him to a bowl next time. Norin hesitates but eventually agrees reluctantly. The next day at school, Juzo is introduced to a new topic in math, but he finds it extremely difficult to understand no matter how much effort he puts into studying it. Even after trying to review it on his own, the concepts just do not make sense to him, and he starts to feel frustrated. When he gets home, he decides to ask Nakota for help, hoping he might be able to explain things in a simpler way. However, Nakota turns out to be just as bad at math, so he is unable to help at all. With no other easy option left, Juzo decides to call Iri and ask her to teach him, but Iri does not want to get involved in that kind of situation, so she simply tells Juzo to ask his teacher at school instead. Juzo points out that his teacher is much younger than him, which makes him feel uncomfortable about asking for help, but Iri does not sympathize with him and bluntly tells him to either drop his pride and ask for help or figure things out on his own. The next day, Juzo still refuses to ask any questions during class, and as new material is introduced, he falls even further behind in the math syllabus. After class, he rests his head on his desk, feeling stuck and unsure of how he is going to understand any of this. At that moment, a blue-haired boy named Ryo walks up to him and asks if he needs help with something. Juzo explains that he cannot understand the current topic, and after listening carefully, Ryo realizes that the real problem comes from earlier gaps in his knowledge. He explains that Juzo likely never fully learned basic arithmetic, which is why the current topic feels so confusing. Juzo quickly realizes that Ryo is right, as he spent most of his childhood training to become a hitman instead of focusing on schoolwork. Understanding the situation, Ryo tells him that he often comes to study there as well and suggests that they study together regularly. From that point on, Juzo spends a large amount of time studying with Ryo, and over the next 2 weeks, he slowly rebuilds his understanding of the basics. Then one day, the math teacher gives the class a surprise quiz, and Juzo is almost overwhelmed with emotion when he realizes that he scored 100%. Juzo excitedly tells Ryo about his result and thanks him sincerely for all the help, but Ryo tells him that Juzo deserves most of the credit because he took the time to relearn and truly understand the fundamentals. Hearing this makes Juzo even happier, and he continues to thank Ryo. To celebrate, they decide to go to a restaurant together, but when they arrive, a man accidentally bumps into Ryo and spills coffee all over his laptop. Instead of apologizing, the man gets angry at Ryo, even though it was mostly his own fault. Despite this, Ryo chooses to apologize first because he prefers to avoid unnecessary trouble. After they sit down, Juzo praises Ryo, saying it is impressive how he was able to teach him so much while also managing his own studies. Curious, Juzo asks Ryo if he has any personal personal goals he is working toward. After hearing this, Ryo decides to open up and shares that he has always wanted to become a doctor, which Juzo immediately thinks is a great goal. However, Ryo admits that it feels a bit embarrassing for him to talk about, and he explains that when he was younger, his mother became sick and eventually passed away. During the times when his father was not around, it was his grandmother who took care of him. However, as time passed, his grandmother's health also began to decline, and seeing that happen made a strong impact on him. It was at that moment he decided that he wanted people like his mother and grandmother to live longer, which became the main reason he chose to pursue becoming a doctor. When Juzo hears this, he is deeply moved and immediately starts tearing up because he finds the reason so sincere and heartfelt. Just then, the man who had spilled his coffee earlier walks over to their table and interrupts them, saying that wanting to become a doctor is nothing but stupidity and a waste of money. He admits that he had been listening to their conversation and claims that Ryo's story sounds unrealistic and disconnected from reality. Hearing this, Juzo becomes angry and starts thinking about hitting him, but Ryo quickly warns him that they should not resort to violence. The man then shifts his attention to Juzo and mocks him, calling him pathetic for struggling with first-year middle school work. He continues insulting both of them, calling them useless and looking down on them, but at that point Ryo suddenly stands up with a serious expression on his face. He calmly points out that everything the man is saying has nothing to do with his reason for wanting to become a doctor. He adds that even if the man thinks he is right, there is something wrong with him if he insults others just because they have different views. Ryo also makes it clear that he will not stay silent while someone tries to belittle Juzo's hard work. The other customers in the cafe begin to step in, telling the man to mind his own business and stop causing trouble. Feeling embarrassed by the attention, the man becomes flustered and quickly leaves the shop. After that, Juzo and Ryo also leave the diner, and Juzo praises Ryo for standing up to the man, saying it made him respect him even more. However, not long after they leave, Juzo senses that the same man is approaching them quickly on a bike. He assumes the man is coming back to take revenge for being embarrassed earlier, so he decides to deal with the situation himself. At the right moment, Juzo throws a divider at the bike's wheel, causing the man to lose control and go flying off the bridge into the water below. Ryo hears the sound of something falling into the water, but has no idea what actually happened because he was looking the other way the entire time. When he asks about it, Juzo simply tells him not to worry and brushes it off. The next day, before waking up, Juzo has a dream where he remembers how little time he spent with his daughter, Kazue, in the past because he was always focused on his work as a hitman. Seeing it from this perspective fills him with regret as he realizes how much he missed out on. He wakes up shortly after, and when Nakoda enters the room, he is shocked by how messy and dirty it is. Nakoda immediately starts cleaning up the place, while Juzo apologizes and explains that he has not called the housekeeper in a while. Nakoda then tells him that he should clean it himself instead, but Juzo refuses, saying that men do not do that kind of work. Hearing that response helps Nakoda understand why Juzo is still single even though he is nearly 40 years old. After that, Juzo heads to school and notices that club activities are starting up that week. Nakoda asks him what kind of club he plans to join, and Juzo explains that he will probably avoid athletic clubs because he would stand out too much compared to everyone else. To show what he means, he casually throws a baseball bat at a pitcher with inhuman speed, making it clear that his abilities are far beyond normal. Later in class, Juzo asks Ryo what club he is thinking of joining, and Ryo says he plans to join the kendo club, mainly because he practiced it when he was younger and genuinely enjoys it. Juzo then tells Ryo that he intends to stay away from anything athletic and instead join a cultural club, such as the Home Economics Club. However, at that moment, Ryo's older sister, Chisato, suddenly appears and wraps her arm around Juzo in a very familiar way. She introduces herself as the head of the Home Economics Club and explains that Ryo has already told her quite a lot about Juzo, which made her curious about him. She invites Juzo to attend their club meeting later that day, and before leaving, she jokingly threatens to stop Ryo from seeing him if he does not show up. Since Juzo does not want to lose his first real friend, he decides to attend the session. When he arrives, the club's first activity is to make rice balls and miso soup. As Juzo looks around, he is surprised to see several boys in the club, since he originally expected it to be made up of only girls due to the focus on cooking and sewing. Before the activity activity begins, Chisato approaches Juzo with a wager. She tells him that if he participates in the day's activities and still finds them boring, then he wins, and she will take care of his daily needs for the next 6 months. However, if he ends up enjoying it, then she wins, and he has to join the club. Juzo realizes that he does not really have much of a choice but to accept the challenge, so he agrees to the wager. He begins cooking with guidance from the other club members, and when he tastes the miso soup, he admits that it is actually very good. At the end of the session, as everyone starts leaving, Chisato asks Juzo what he thinks about the club. He responds by saying that it was fine, but nothing particularly special. Chisato laughs at his response, understanding that she did not fully meet his expectations. Juzo then suggests that they should call the wager a draw, but Chisato refuses and insists that the contest is not over yet. As Juzo walks home afterward, Nakoda comments that he didn't need to be so stubborn just because he did not want to lose. Nakoda points out that Juzo clearly enjoyed the food, but still downplayed the experience by saying the club was just okay. Juzo responds by explaining that it wasn't really about the food itself, but rather that he did not feel anything strong enough to motivate him to stay in the club. When he finally gets home, Eri calls him to thank him for the leftovers he brought back from the home economics club. She adds that she and Kazue already ate them and thought they were delicious. Eri then hands the phone over to Kazue, and Kazue tells Juzo that the food was really good and thanks him sincerely for it. Hearing this makes Juzo remember what Chisato said earlier, that cooking for yourself is fine, but cooking for someone important is where the real enjoyment comes from. Juzo realizes that this is the first time in a long while that either Eri or Kazue has thanked him for anything, and that realization affects him more than he expected. After thinking about it carefully, he decides that he will join the home economics club. The next day, he submits his application to Chisato, and she is clearly delighted to see that he has decided to join. As Juzo leaves the classroom, he runs into Norin and finds out that she has also joined the home economics club. Norin is surprised to hear that Juzo joined as well, but Juzo simply tells her that the reason is a bit complicated. Norin does not press him further and walks away, reminding him that just because they are in the same club does not mean they are friends. As Juzo heads to his next class, Nakoda receives an email from Eri explaining the condition needed for Juzo to return to his original form, and from Nakoda's expression alone, it is clear that the situation is serious. Nakoda then tells Juzo that in order to return to his original form, he will have to marry Norin. Hearing this shocks Juzo so much that he can barely process it, as he cannot understand how those two things are connected. Nakoda explains that Juzo's transformation was caused by the wasp, which is a product of Mitsuoka Pharmaceuticals, meaning that the company is the only place where information about reversing it exists. He goes on to say that using threats or force will not work, so the only realistic way to gain access to that information is by inheriting the company, which would require Juzo to marry Norin. Nakoda presents this as Juzo's new mission, but Juzo immediately feels that it is impossible, as the idea of a man close to 40 becoming engaged to a middle school girl does not sit right with him at all. Later that day, Juzo goes to a ramen shop to relax with his favorite bowl of ramen, and when he finishes and prepares to leave, Norin also ends her shift, so they end up walking home together. During the walk, Norin vents her frustration about her father, especially because he is rarely at home, but Juzo is only half listening since he is more focused on an English quiz he has the next day. Norin starts scolding him for ignoring what she is saying, but after a while, her anger fades and turns into laughter as she realizes that this kind of meaningless back and forth is something she actually wants to have with friends. Even so, she quickly adds that she is not saying she considers Juzo to be that kind of friend. The next day, during club activities, Juzo is excited to cook something good again, but he quickly notices that there are many new members in the club. It turns out that a large number of students joined because they heard that Norin was part of it. Norin begins to feel overwhelmed as several boys keep approaching her and asking her out, so in order to put an end to it once and for all, she walks over to Juzo and suddenly announces that he is her boyfriend, leaving everyone there, including Juzo, completely speechless. That was episode 3. Subscribe to not miss the next part and watch the next video on screen.